Okay.
I need to find.
We're on now.
Yes, sir.
We want to remind Victoria residents that they can watch the City Council meeting live on Suddenlink channel 15 or 115 on our city website at www.victoriatx.gov//VTV15 or on the city's Facebook page. If you want to participate in today's citizens communication segment of tonight's meeting, you can do so through a video conferencing option. We have set this option to limit social gatherings, protect our citizens and city employees from COVID-19. Here's how to access the video conferencing in the citizens communication. Visit www.zoom.com from your web browser. Select Join a Meeting. Located at the top of your browser and input 444-573-13 for the meeting ID. Select Join, followed by Open Zoom, then Join with computer audio. Click on the icon labeled Participants to access the option to raise hand at the bottom of the screen. Once you click Raise Hand, our moderator will announce you by your username you've selected, and that will be your cue to begin speaking to council. Comment will be provided with audio only. There will not be an opportunity at the time to share your screen with any additional presentations. Remember to silence all cell phones, televisions, and other background so that we can clearly hear your comments. During the citizens communication segment of tonight's meeting, the 5-minute comment period still applies as it did when citizens were in person. Again, we ask that your comments be 5 minutes or less. This information is posted on the website again at victoria.gov/VDV15. It is generally the practice of the City Council not to respond to comments during this time, but city staff will be available to follow up as necessary. Now we'll ask our city secretary to call roll of council members present.
Thank you. Councilman De La Garza,
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Solis,
Here.
Councilman Bachnight,
Here.
Councilwoman Scott, Councilman Young,
Here.
Councilman Lofgren,
I'm here.
and Mayor McCoy.
Here,
Thank you.
I believe we have a full quorum of council members tonight, and now I open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
We will now move on into the meeting with items from council.
Mayor McCoy, I have an item, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to have staff at a future meeting give us an update and status report on Tanglewood subdivision, the streets in Tanglewood. That has been something that I've heard about since before I became a council member, and they were supposed to be starting to work on those streets in 21, year one, and I know things have changed a little, but I'd like to have an up and possibly some council discussion on it.
Okay. Any other items from council? Hearing none, we'll move on in citizens communication.
So Mayor, at this point, James will pay attention to who has got their hand raised. And
Okay.
when you're ready, he'll tell us the first name.
Very well. We're ready.
Mayor, the first person to speak is Brenda Taylor, and we're allowing her to talk now. So go ahead and go to the next one,
Welcome, Ms. Taylor.
and then go down to just click here, and then when she gets to the next one, Miss Taylor, you want to unmute yourself? She is unmuted, however, we cannot hear. I cannot hear her. Okay. Come back. Her.
think you're breaking up too, James.
Later, let me try the next citizen, which is Wendy. Okay, Wendy, you're allowed to talk. Okay, so now you. Okay, I'm not hearing anything.
I see that Wendy is still muted.
James, when are you dropping your album?
Wendy, allow her to talk. Kim Pickens, you're also muted. Could you please unmute?
Okay, I thought I just did. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep,
I can hear.
Okay. My name is Kim Pickens, and I appreciate your time. The issue of Confederate statues and whether or not they should stand or be moved is far more complicated than just removing history. It is more about humanity than any of us want to admit. We can all agree that history is the past, something we can't change as individuals living in the present. Where we seem to be getting caught up in the conversation about the Confederacy is about blame and responsibility. Something that ended 155 years ago seems so far away, but that was just a great grandparent away for many of us. No one likes to be responsible, or for that matter, blamed for something as ugly as chattel slavery. There was nothing glamorous about the owning of human beings. Unfathomable to buy and sell other people, separate children to never be seen again. We like to think that we ourselves would never will enslave generations of people because of their skin color, but it did happen. In our country, people in our state, and more relevant to this discussion, people in the believed it was not only their duty to uphold slavery as an institution, but their right to uphold the institution of white supremacy here in Korea, as we were one of the first 3 cities to become part of the Republic of Texas in 1809. Those ideas were central to the Confederacy and why they fought in the Civil War. The fact that the Confederacy lost this war should have been the end of the conversation. It would have shown that as a united country, we reject the idea that people of African descent are less than human and deserve to be enslaved for eternity. That leaves us with this statue, The Last Stand. It sounds like a movie title where the weary hero stands alone fighting his enemy. However, this war had been over for 47 years when that statue was dedicated in 1912. The United Daughters of the Confederacy was formed in Victoria 31 years after the conclusion of the Civil War and 7 days after the Supreme Court decision of Plessy v. Ferguson, which allowed separate but equal facilities, keeping Black and white people segregated in 1896. Post-Civil War, the UDC chapters would raise money to build statues to remind communities of the values held dear by the Confederacy, a more tangible token of their ideology. There is no ambiguity as to why this statue was erected in the middle of downtown Victoria. It sent a message that white people will always be considered better than people of color, which included African and Native American peoples. There is nothing romantic about this statue and represents an idea, not an actual person. That there are people defending this idea is the discussion that needs to be had and the reason we are bringing this city council now. We are seeing a multicultural movement of people demanding change, as we saw during the civil rights movement 60 years ago. People like Fannie Lou Hamer, Lewis, Emma Sanders, and Dr. King, who stood up and spoke out against white supremacist laws that kept people from accessing their constitutional rights even after 3 amendments. That work was rooted in love and community. That love is what brings me here today. We must address our past so it can be reconciled and a new way forged forward that promotes unity and diversity. For 100 years, this statue has been a reminder of Confederate values and ideologies. The plaque states on civilization's how immutable they stand. The that ideology was met here in June. Over 800 people said yes to love and community, a cross-section of culture, skin color, age, and religion. People who said it's enough to the idea that 108 years later, we still have a symbol of hate standing in our town square, pretending it doesn't matter because we're not racist. We have Black friends and family, own slaves. We had a Black president. I did okay and I'm Black. I'm here to proclaim that being just okay is not okay for everyone. My husband read that plaque the first time he visited the square back in 2012. As a Black man, he hated what that statue represented and spent the next 7 years sitting in that plaza to heal our community without anyone but me knowing. When I had his memorial service in that plaza last year, there was a cross of people of various skin colors, ages, and religions who stood on this soil, unified diversity. Love won that day. We can't change the past, but we can change the future with love, courage, and thoughtful intent. That thoughtful intention begins with moving the statue to Evergreen Cemetery, where there are Confederate soldiers buried. Let's tie the historical context of their lives to our time in our history, not to be repeated. Leave that empty space it used to occupy empty, serving as a reminder that community reject hate and ignorance. May that empty space serve as a reminder that we're open to love, a place where dreams wide open and everyone is welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Pickens. James, you might want to check the timer. We have another comment. Any more comments?
So Mayor James is still muted, it looks like. I'm unable to unmute folks on my end because some technical issues we're having. But it looks like Wendy has still got her hand raised and was muted earlier. I don't know if we want to go back and try her again.
I'm still mute on Wendy. I see.
I'm sorry. Okay, I am back and now I'm looking for my attendees. So we have Rick who is wanting to speak. Let me try to get Rick to pull up in there. Let's try Chris. Chris, are you able to speak?
I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Victory Council for the opportunity to address this at a time of unprecedented challenge and hardship in our communities and our nation. It is my hope that these comments find your families healthy and prosperous. Time is short, so I'll get right to the issue at hand, and I think it's important to cut through the fog of this issue and the divide and conquer tactics being employed nationwide. The subject at hand, in my opinion, has little to do with the monument itself and more to do with a continued assault nationwide on our citizens designed to intimidate political leadership on all levels, including city, state, and county governments by organizations and political entities seeking to disrupt and destroy this nation from within. The citizens you serve are not wandering in bewilderment by the issues facing us. We fully understand the election cycle and we fully understand challenges being leveled at folks looking up for elections. The Marxism, communism, and socialism has been removed from the dark closet and hidden suspicion populace. This has been a stunning revelation, one that was suspected and with most denying it and saying it's not really true. The strategic unveiling that the majority never thought they would witness in their lifetime. If nothing else good from the 2020 election cycle, I submit that this unveiling is a blessing that will save our nation. We've learned in the brutal jungles of Vietnam, barren shale of Afghanistan, to the war-torn streets of Syria, and the inability to clearly identify compounds and prolongs the suffering of armed conflict. This unidentifiable enemy no longer exists in the United States. I think it only logical that anyone caught in the short-lived light of a Marxist uprising should take heed, as we the people will not submit to it, nor will we be complicit in fostering it. Let's get one thing clear. The agenda left has been exposed in Patriots Coast and intrastate, from Seadrift, Texas, to the Rio Grande grasslands and the El Paso Sabine River are wide awake. I believe our political bodies are being tested and probed as to the resolve and weakness of these bodies, and whether or not Victoria, Texas is with an escalating radical agenda. Will Victoria become the next Austin? Is it possible that this great freedom and opportunity loving city will next be taking up of defunding law enforcement? Will the citizens have to put out the flame radical agendas here as well? The question that this council can answer immediately by rejecting the divisive agenda, attempting to strip the land of beauty, honoring the sacrifice of better men while teaching the horrors of the unthinkable. So, isn't it interesting that at a time when social media is filled with hot-blooded rhetoric of the possibility of civil war, that Marxist entities are seeking to remove the very monuments that educate our children as to the horrors of such a thing? Make no mistake, the voting public and taxpaying citizens are outraged as state, city, and local municipalities surrender to cancel culture and communist ideologies that are stripping and defacing multi-generational art of all genres from our land. Years ago, we were thought crude and uncultured if we embrace a painting of an upside-down fix in a wine glass full of urine. It is an outrage that these communities and their citizens bear the cost of these removals, further adding insult to incompetence. I submit a quick way to put an end to this would be to place the costs and burden of these removals squarely on the entity seeking the removal. But no, the hardworking taxpayers bear the cost. Citizens suffer due to incompetent leadership and complicity of those seeking the short-term rules of pandering to the enemy of mind. It's obvious that left-wing radicals are attempting to divide us along lines, and I'm here to offer hope that we will not take that bait. Patriots do not know a particular gender, race, creed, or sexual orientation. We are united in our defense of this nation and the principles for which it was. While the ills of failed ideologies is on the march, and many of citizens are astounded and outraged by the visuals we're seeing in so many failed leftist-controlled areas, take heart that we will overcome, that the nation is united in its defense of freedom and liberty for all citizens, and this body has an opportunity to stop this progression and stop it now. I submit that the monument remain in place, let the dead rest in peace. Let it remain an example of the need for everlasting peace and the horrors of war. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have another speaker, a Moto X4.
Mayor, we would ask that the citizens who speak state their name, just so that we can get an accurate reflection in the city's minutes.
My name is Linda Henry. And I would just like to say, I don't, can you,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, stop. I think this meeting format is really bad. Public meetings should be in public. For one, if we can wear a mask and social distance, we should be public. Okay, because there's a lot of people that ain't gonna see this, hear this because of what it is. That being said, the statue on the square here in Victoria, it's been there for a long time. It's not hurt anybody. You know, it may have been maybe a Confederate soldier, but guess what? It's the last stand. If you look at the statue, the clothing is tattered. The soldier is defeated. Okay, this trying to say that because it's there and it says we want slavery. No, 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 no. Nobody wants that. It hadn't been wanted. No one's wanted that for forever. And this is not what it stands for. But if we go and take this statue down because of a very few people, leftist ideology going on, just like it is, and we're not Portland, we're not Seattle, we're not DC or Chicago, we're Victoria. This step does not mean anyone wants to see slavery again. No one does. I just think this is a crazy idea. Move it. People are trying to jump on a bandwagon. We don't want that bandwagon here in Victoria. We want Victoria to remain Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can move back to the beginning. Our next panelist is Michelle. We're allowing her to talk.
That's me.
Yes, ma'am. Can you state your full name, please?
My name is Michelle Adams,
Thank you.
There you go.
and I'm here to also speak on the Confederate movement. But first and foremost, I would like to second the comments made by Chris, and they were right on the head. I'm working on a graduate degree to teach history, and I get out and I look at the nation and the world right now, and I'm thinking, okay, when I graduate, how much of my history is really going to be left by the time the cancel culture gets through tearing it down? I have proven, this is not presumption, this is not, I guess, this is fact. I have proven direct or collateral ancestry from 15 Confederate veterans. 15 that served 5 states, including the great state of Texas. This truly is my heritage, and I fight for it. Victoria is not Austin, and Victoria is not DC, Victoria is not Minneapolis. Texas is freaking Texas. And last time I heard, General Sam said, we've never bowed to submission from whatever source it may come. I don't expect to see Texas bowing to submission now. Texas needs to stand in what Texas is, what Texas has always been. Texas leads the way. Texas has always led the way. Texas is proud. Texas is so full of history that I plan to make a career out of teaching. If we do not stand up as Texans and as citizens and as patriots to defend our history, us history teachers will have a hard time explaining this to your students why. You can't teach a war if you take out a whole half of the war. You can't, how do I in 2020 to my student in 2050? How do I tell them, okay, the far left agenda has come in and they're offended by everything, and unless it fits this particular agenda, then you can't have it, and anybody that disagrees with them is just tough, they can't say it. Last time I looked, the First Amendment still has a place. The First Amendment still grants us all the freedom to speak our opinions on any given matter that comes to our situation. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to stand in defense of not this monument, but every Confederate monument in the state of Texas that's still left standing. This is not just a monument. is our history. It's even history, it belongs to the people who want badly to tear it down. Because history is one of the few things in this world that unites us all, because we are all connected to it. I thank y'all for the opportunity to speak. I thank you for me out, and God bless the great Texas. God bless America. We need his help more than ever. I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments.
Yes, sir.
Next up is citizens for the community Crossroads, Texas. You're allowed to speak.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear
Yeah.
me? You can hear me? Okay. My name is Lisa Reese. I'm the co-founder of an organization called CTC-CTX. And before I start actual very short speech, I'm actually going to speak to a couple of things that was recently said. One, that monument does not pay homage to my heritage. I self-identify as a mestizo woman, and under the Mexican reign, this particular territory was not supportive of slavery. Slavery came in after it was taken from Mexican lead. Okay, that's what pays homage to my history, to my age. Not a Confederate statute aided in taking away my heritage from this territory. Okay, two, we never ever want to cost the taxpayers anything more, which is why in my speech you'll understand how we're assisting in doing just that. Once again, my name is Lisa Reese. I'm a co-founder of an organization, a fair organization called CTC-CTX. It stands for Citizens of the Community Crossroads of Texas. We not only Victoria, but we consider the surrounding towns that contribute to our workforce and our commerce. Our primary objective is to emphasize the unity within community. And in order to do so, we must do away with symbolisms that support anarchy within the different races slash cultures. The basic and simple definition of a monument is a statue, building, or other structure erected to commemorate a famous or notable person or event. The last stand Confederate monument commemorates the Confederacy and was erected by the UDC, which both pay homage to the institution of slavery and white supremacy, and we can adequately prove within our history research these are facts. With the assistance of UHV faculty members, we have put together a task force in hopes of having the monument moved and placed in a much more appropriate location, such as the Confederate Cemetery located right here in Victoria. Someone had mentioned earlier that we need to still pay respect to the Confederate deceased. What a perfect way to pay that respect, to put a monument in place where they're buried. Our task force consists of the two UHB professors slash historians, the UHB provost slash VP of academic affairs, and two licensed psychiatrists that specialize in historical trauma. We also have a private 501c3 organization that is volunteered to assist in financial cost of moving the monument from one place in the town to another place in the town. We are currently meeting with civil rights attorneys who are willing to volunteer their services if need be. Our goal is to have a seat at the table and begin a true dialogue. Mr. Mayor, you and State Representative Michael Cloud recently met, said you were both interested in opening up dialogues about this very issue. Now is the time, and here is your opportunity. We implore you to put a true effort into this project. We must come together and find a resolution here. Mr. Mayor and City Council members, if you for one tiny little moment believe there is not a problem in our beautiful little bitty, please consider this. Since the very moment that the Victoria Advocate posted the first article about this monument, I personally, because my name was very much involved in that article, have received death threats. I have insulted and harassed with very motivated hate words. I've had to take my multiple business pages due to harassments, and I've now had to take certain safety measures. So please do not for one moment think that there is not a problem and there's not a divide already within our city. Biggest things that we've been asked is why now? this monument's never bothered anyone before. No, it has bothered us for years. We were just too scared to do anything for the reactions we are now receiving. So we lay down the facts, we lay down the history, we lay down the professional opinions, and we keep it non-emotional and fact-based. I thank everyone for their time. You guys have a blessed evening.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments. What else?
Next person is Chance Glenn. Chance Glenn, you will need to unmute yourself.
I have. Can you all hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to address this from the standpoint of what it is we see here in this beautiful town that I've recently moved to and have gotten to know people, places here. And as I visited that statue for the first time, down in the center of town, in the center of a park that is there to commemorate the founder of this town. It stood there as a indication of reverence, something that is revered, that is honored. And once you understand the motivation behind the statue, as our historians have so aptly put, and no one here has disagreed with the motivations for the placement of that statue, it says to me that this is what the city of Victoria stands for. There's no other statues in town that says anything else other than that. And the way the monument is erected, it gives the impression that this is what the town stands for. Then as I look across the landscape of the leadership of the city, the ownership of property and wealth in town, even given the population dynamics, it appears to me that the message that is being given to the rest of the citizenry is that there is indeed a hierarchy, and that hierarchy must be maintained. And I submit that the history that those who have spoken here and those within this region are so motivated to hold on to is not the history of Confederacy or a warrior or what have you, but it is the history of hierarchy that existed then and exists now. But I submit that there is a better day for us. There's a better time for us. See, here's the other part, since we're talking about history, we are living in history right now. Living history with regards to the health issues that are going on in the country, living in history regards to the socio-economic issues and racial issues that are causing us evil right now. What side of history will we come out on, and what's the future? See, the history always leads to the future. And what we must decide as a town is what future do we intend to establish here? We've had several conversations about economic future of Victoria and drawing opportunity here, and also causing our young people to stay and to grow and to thrive in this town. Well, what message are we sending if we are so determined to hang on to past and all of the ugliness that goes with that past? And that is the future that we want to build. Then how do we attract and hold and keep the people here that we need to make this a thriving community. And finally, because many of you grew up together, and I've heard that, Victoria was a place where people grew up together, and different people, different backgrounds grew up and lived together. Well, I submit to you that your fellow Victorians who you walk and talk with every day, that statue and that monument stands as an offense to those people, myself included. My question is to you, do you care about your fellow citizens enough to say, what I want to hold on to is not more important than what the future that we want to walk into together? So that's why we should take this monument, put it in its place in the graveyard. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
Next citizen is Joe Fox. You're allowed to talk.
Hello, my name is Joe Fox. I'm a former teacher at Victoria High School, as well as a Texas historian. I'm speaking today to offer a few thoughts on the current debate regarding the Last Stand statue de Leon Plaza and why I believe that it should remain standing. My reason is not out of support for the Confederate lost cause, but because of the importance of local history and maintaining community during these difficult times. Although not originally from Victoria, this community has had a special place in my heart. I was reminded of this last Memorial Day when I attended a ceremony in De Leon Plaza with my parents. What I saw there was a diverse cross-section of Victorians and backgrounds united in honoring the veterans from our community and praying for the welfare of our country. The following week, the death of George Floyd occurred in Minneapolis, launching protests across the country, calling for a reform of police departments and for America to come to terms with its racist history. What this kind of terms look like is the subject of many questions happening in our community and expresses sentiment for a more perfect union, living up to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence and our country's highest aspirations. Many would argue because of the history of slavery and segregation in our community and in the rest of it is necessary to remove the statue de Leon Plaza because the statue tells the world that Victoria, to paraphrase Felix Robertson, who spoke at the inauguration in 1912, is a white man. Racism and slavery and segregation are a part of our history. And I would agree with any of the speakers here that we need to address this in telling the city's history. However, Robertson, who is not from Victoria, was not the only speaker at the 1912 inauguration organized by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Undoubtedly, the daughters were believers in the lost cause, but with many of them also being orphan widows of Confederate veterans themselves, a more immediate reason to commemorate the Victorians 50 years after the war. They labored hard to raise funds on their own initiative and build support for a memorial built by Roman sculptor Pompeo Cupini, which was no easy task. To them, this task worth doing because out of the 654 Confederate volunteers from Victoria who were fighting in a losing cause and one that were fortunate they lost them. Out of the 654 Confederate volunteers who served Texas infantry, who trained here at Camp Henry McAuliffe, only 100 made it back home in battles at Arkansas Post, Chickamauga, and Franklin, as well as many others. As a result, most speakers recorded by the advocate spoke of remembering the dead and dead, but also of loyalty to the United States of America, values that are needed today during these difficult times. As Victoria's Mayor William J. Craig, when we spoke at the inauguration, the war is over, and that flag waves about united people, where it is loved by every heart and would be defended by every hand. Victoria has progressed as a community to where the ideals of Craig with the statue and not the ideals of Ron. How then do we address the needs to better understand the history of African Americans as well as other here, as so eloquently expressed by other speakers here this evening, while also honoring Victorians who fought in the Civil War? Rather than tear down the last stand statue, we should instead follow the lead of the Texas Capitol in Austin in building new monuments to reflect a more diverse city. In the same way, Victorians are already raising funds to build a memorial for our city's founders, Martin and Patricia de Leon. We should build a statue commemorating Juneteenth, the holiday marking news of emancipation reaching Texas, as the contributions of Americans to our city's history, who labored through Jim Crow and segregation. By doing so, we encourage a fuller and more inclusive view of our city's history and build a stronger community and country. Thank you for your time, and God bless our country.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Okay, the next citizen to speak is Joe, it's Locke or Lockheed?
Yes, it's Locke. Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I really appreciate you all dedicating your time and opening up the floor for discussion. I'm a history professor here at UHV. I've taught American history and Texas history for 10 years, 6 of them here in Victoria. I'm a Southern historian by training. I received my PhD from Rice University. I studied under the president of the Southern Historical Association. I've worked at the papers of Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy, and I've written and published books on history and American history. I should also add that I'm also a 5th-generation Texan. My great-great-grandfather fought for the Confederacy. And in fact, in 1910, he traveled to Austin to dedicate a monument not unlike ours. So if this monument's intended to capture anyone's heritage, it would surely be mine. But while I have my own personal opinions on this statue, I'd instead like to speak tonight as an ambassador for my profession, the historical profession, and to communicate to you all the consensus of trained historians all across the country. We've heard many claims that to remove this monument to, quote, erase history, and I would like to assure you all and all Victorians that to remove this statue is emphatically not to erase history. The American Historical Association, which is the professional association for American historians, no different than the American Medical Association is for doctors, and 2017 declared unequivocally in an official statement that was coded by another 24 major historical societies that, quote, to remove such monuments is neither to change history nor erase it. What changes with such removals is what American communities decide is worthy of civic honor. Further, the AHA recommended communities such as ours that for understanding the specific historical context of Confederate monuments, it is imperative to have informed public debate. As Dr. Laura Mamina explained in our June 11th tutorial in The Advocate, our monument was explicitly dedicated as a monument to white supremacists and to the lost cause myths about the Confederacy. This isn't some after the fact assertion, it isn't some 21st century political correctness run amok. This is precisely what the people who dedicated this monument explicitly said, and they couldn't have been clearer about. In fact, the monument itself was in its own way an erasure and a distortion of history. It tells a misleading one-sided story of the Civil War and the Confederacy that Americans in 1865 remember that our statue was dedicated half a century after the war, simply recognized. I hope Dr. Mamina will speak and better describe the distortions that went into the statue, but to be clear, to remove this statue is not to erase the history of the Civil War. The statue is not a relic of the 1860s. It is a relic of 1912 and a distorted version of history that white Southerners fought very hard to spread and to a white supremacy and a Jim Crow system that we're very much still building at the turn of the 20th century. The AHA goes on to say that we urge communities faced with decisions about monuments to draw on the expertise of historians for understanding the facts and chronology underlying these monuments. In line with recommendations, I would only ask respectfully that defenders of this monument cease invoking history if they will not listen to the judgments of historians themselves. As I said, these are not just my opinions. They're the judgment of nearly every major historical association in this country. They're the judgment of our recent prize winners. They're the judgment of our prominent documentarians. They're the judgment of American historians. Victoria is absolutely, this is a 200-year-old city. It has a fascinating history. And in fact, we need more statues, more monuments. We need more memorials, but not this one. It doesn't belong in a public space. It belongs instead in a museum that can be contextualized as the artifact of history that it is, not history itself. In 4 years, we're going to celebrate our bicentennial. We have the opportunity to right decide what this city wants to be, what face it wants to put forward to the region, the state, the rest of the country. And I would urge you all to make sure that this is not the one it put. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Okay, so. Next citizen to speak is Don Crawford.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Crawford?
They're not Mr. Crawford. This is Mr.
Oh.
Burkhardt.
Okay, Mr. Burkhardt.
You want me to go ahead and speak to
Oh,
and come back to Mr. Crawford?
I think you're
You
on.
can
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Brandon Burkhardt, and I'm the president of a nonprofit organization called This is Texas Freedom Force. We're a nonprofit organization that works on the preservation of Texas history, and we own within the compounds of the borders of the great state of Texas. I'm here to tell you guys, the City Council of Victoria, first of all, thank you for allowing the citizens to have an opportunity to speak on this. But I think that the citizens are pretty clear on where they stand on this, and that is to leave our monuments alone, quit trying to erase history, and quit trying to remove these monuments. If you go back to the Republican convention, not this one that's taken place in 2020, but the one before that, Plank 296 was passed unanimously that stated to leave Texas historical monuments alone, as well as not moving the Alamo Cenotaph. Coming up in this, or excuse me, past previous election for the primaries, it was 97.5% of Texans across the state vote to leave our monuments alone. This is not just one person, one organization speaking. This is the entire state of Texas speaking. Then when it comes down to this 2020 convention, Republican convention, which is happening right now, Plank 302 was passed with the same exact wording to leave historical monuments alone and to leave the Alamo Cenotaph alone, because that's putting inside the plank of number 302. I speak on behalf of hundreds of thousands of Texans. We have over 50,000 paying members in our organization, and we represent close to about 150 to 200,000 Texans across the state. This is all we do, is fight to protect our history. Most importantly, and the lady that was from the other organization that claimed that she had threats on her life, well, you know, it was our organization standing in front of the Alamo on May 30th and stopped over 4,000 of the people she supposedly is bringing forth and her supporters that are trying to burn the Alamo to the ground. We went in hand with the San Antonio Police Department, and guess what? The Alamo did not get touched that because of our organization and our operations with the San Antonio Police Department. So I'm asking you guys to do one or two things. If you want to do something appeases the other side, let them build plaques to tell their side of the story. Nobody is saying that slavery is right, even care what color your skin is. Something that should be the furthest from our mind is the left that keeps bringing this stuff up, that keeps bringing the issue of race up and throwing it into the face of everybody around. So let them build a plaque, let them build a monument, but leave Capini's work alone. The man is not here to be able to recreate a new monument. History, whether it is good or bad, it is still history, and it still got us where we are today. And whether you like it or not, those that do not know history are going to be doomed to repeat it. And if we continue to remove our monuments from across the state of Texas, across our country, then eventually we're going to end up repeating what happened in the Civil War. Not that the Civil War was solely about racism, because it played a very, very small part of the Civil War. Most of the main issue of the Civil War was taxation. It's the South, unfair taxation. But nobody wants to bring that part up because everybody wants to cry foul and racism. So I'm asking you guys to leave the monument where it sits today and either erect another monument, tease the other side, or try to have discussion in them. And I know that from the CCXYZ group, whatever she called herself from, said that she had it at your table. I would hope that the city council would offer us, our organization, our nonprofit organization, a seat table too, if you want to discuss anything concerning the monuments, because we are the oldest and largest history preservation group inside the great state of Texas, and with the job done. So I appreciate you. Thank you. And I hope that you will leave it where it sits today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Burkhart.
Okay, so now we're going to try Don Crawford. You're allowed to talk.
Don Crawford. I'm from Victoria, Texas. Today have become divided, as seen by the comments here. They're divided by race, by gender, by ethnicity, by sexual orientation, by wealth, and by political party. The most significant division of Americans, however, is based on ideologies. This is because at the heart of each classification which divides America, we typically find two camps of ideologies. One camp, regardless of color and other characteristics, believes in political correctness, equality of outcomes, and the ideas promoted by the organization called Black Lives Matter, which divide Americans and push towards tyranny. This camp represents progressive ideology. Mr. Locke and his story he cited believe in progressive ideology. Their camp, regardless of color and other characteristics, believe in the traditional ideas of America: liberty, we the people, out of many one, colorblind equality under law, which unite Americans and push Americans to freedom. That camp represents patriot ideology. Not only are Americans divided in ideology, those who share progressive ideology are openly engaged in a violent cultural war. Removal of statutes isn't about ownership of slaves. It isn't about history or the past. It's about power today. It's about exercising power, strategies, and tactics to win a cultural war. Removal of this statute divides the citizens of Victoria and serves as a weapon in the cultural war on the side of those who share progressive ideology. Removal of this statute tells the world those who share progressive ideology are powerful, and those who share patriot ideology have no power. Removing and destroying statutes are ways to dehumanize, to humiliate, to demoralize the enemy in the cultural war. Removal of this statute is dominance and supremacy. It's not equality. Republics protect unity and stability for the people by a government following rule of law, not by following emotions of one generation. The law, rather than emotions, decides what is right and what the council should do in this matter. Without the rule of law, there is no safety, no liberty, no equality, no prosperity, no constitution, no republic, and no civilization for anyone. Arbitrary and capricious acts fall outside of the power which gives the council authority to act. In addition, the Texas Constitution reserves the fate of the statute to citizens of Victoria. In other ways, federal laws and state and public policies also protect statute. Removing this statute would place the city council on the side of the radical progressives in the cultural war. Radical progressives carried out the cultural war with malice in their hearts, anarchy in their heads, and chaos at their hands. They have murdered, maimed, and injured innocent citizens, as well as destroyed property, representing the labor of others. In addition, with the claims of slave owner or white supremacists, radical progressives created, burned, and destroyed historic sites, statues, and monuments across the nation. Toxic lists like slave owner or white supremacists negate the true identity and objectify the individual. These labels rob the individual of its God-given humanity. Children of God become only the full connotations associated with this toxic label. Negative labels serve as dog whistles for those who share progressive ideology to target them for punishment and for violence. In short, these negative labels identify the enemy. These tactics of toxic labeling, humiliation, dehumanization, prepare targets for punishment, violence, and destruction. And they have a long evil past. It's used in the extermination camps, used in the Middle East by the Taliban, used by ISIL. In instances, the world condemned these kinds of acts as evil. Some distinctions, in fact, apply, but for some of the tactics, they remain the same. For example, the tactic of dehumanizing an enemy, making it acceptable, applies to all four.
Crawford, I think your time is expired.
Thank you.
I appreciate your comments, sir. Thank you.
Okay, the next citizen is Ron Sandage. Okay, he just. Okay. Next up to speak is Josh G.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. I was hoping I could screen because I have a PowerPoint presentation on the history of the statue, but I guess we have that not active tonight. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm not sure we have the ability to have that other than just verbal comment.
Sure. Well, my name is Josh Garrett. Before I get started, I've produced a lot of documentaries about Victoria that air on this television channel on World War II veterans and the history of Victoria. And so I wanted to put together a presentation about the statue de Leon Plaza. So I'll just, even though I can't show you the slides, I'll go through the presentation for you. The Last Stand, the United Daughter of the Confederacy, and the Lost Cause. The bronze statue located on De Leon Plaza, Victoria, is called The Last Stand. It was sculpted by Pompeo Copani and dedicated on July 1912. On the back of the statue's granite base, a plaque reads, "To the Souls of the Confederate States of America. This monument is dedicated by the William P. Rogers Chapter, United Daughter of the Confederacy, Victoria, Texas, June the AD 1912. On civilization's immutable, they stand." This one part right here is what people probably aren't familiar with, and it's the dedication by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. But who are they? The UDC described themselves as a heritage organization dedicated to preserving the legacy of the South, but that second part, a little bit misleading. Since their founding in 1894, the UDC have erected upwards of 700 or so statues, monuments, and dedications to cement themselves the ultimate authority about the Civil War and the Confederacy. What do they do with that position? They promote an ideology known as the lost cause that alters the way we view and teach history of the Civil War era. The emphasis on minimizing the horrors of, for example, the UDC promotes the idea that Texas seceded from the United States, not because of slavery, but of states' rights. We know also, however, because we have Texas's Declaration of Causes from the Secession of Texas in 1861. Our state openly declared that it abandoned the United States in order to protect the institution known as Negro slavery, the servitude of the African to the white race, which her people intended should exist in all future time. That's a quote. This misdirection of states' rights is one of the UDC's many inaccurate messages. There's a lot of these, such as their catechisms. They have catechisms, which is usually a teaching tool found in religious organizations for educating their members on their pillars of truth. But in UDC's catechisms, they can't even admit that the Confederacy lost. Instead, they say it was overpowered by numbers and its resources exhausted. In it, they also claim that slaves were treated with great kindness and care. But this is where it gets really interesting. As we go further into their catechism, they also say, what secret society saved a civilization and made it possible for white people to reside in the state? The Ku Klux Klan. which was an honorable body of Southern men not bow to Negro domination. That is straight from the UDC, who statue in our public square. They use these catechisms to teach children that they refer to as living monuments. And this isn't just a one-off action. Published and distributed an entire book dedicated to and glorifying KK that was endorsed in 1913 by the entire UDC, just 1 year after the dedication of our statue. So they still held those beliefs. So let's go to modern day. And Tom, city attorney, if you're listening, you'll find this part interesting. Basically, UDC spends their time currently suing anybody who tries to do anything they don't like with a Confederate monument. They've sued cities in North Carolina, Florida, Louisiana, and they've sued the city of San Antonio and Franklin, Tennessee. In Franklin, Tennessee, when they decided to install a Union carriage with a cannon on their public square, nothing happened. But when the city had wanted more markers that described the African-American experience during the Civil War on that same public square, UDC sued, claiming that they owned the property the monument stood on, despite never having paid taxes on the square. So it's not an issue of North versus South. The UDC weaponizes their affluence and position of power in order to silence Black voices, just like they did in the 1960s, where they paid to have educational bills named after Confederate icons as the civil rights movement began and African Americans were allowed to attend schools that were desegregated. Long and short, to recap, the Confederate statue in Victoria, Texas was funded by and placed in our town organization that supported the Ku Klux Klan. And by keeping it, we contribute to a century-long campaign that alters the way we and future generations will look back on the actions of the Confederacy. Again, I remind you, literally abandoned the United States so that they may continue to own Black people. If you're not a fan of this, please contact your council representative at 61485-3030. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the next citizen is Rick. If you could state your full name.
Hello, can you hear me? My name's Rick Goodman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. All I gotta say is the statue stood there for 100 years, and we have so many problems that are going on now in our society that I don't see that this should be something that we really make as a priority, is moving this statue. But a really vocal portion of society in Victoria is what's making this issue. They say that the majority wishes us to move this statue. Well, I'm a 6th generation Victorian. My grandchildren are 8th generations Victorians. And I don't want the statue moved. I think it needs to be right where it is. Now, I don't like the idea of the city council being stampeded by the noise or what just expedient of listening to the people that are upset about this. If the majority of the people in town want it moving, let's put it on the next ballot for an election for the city deal and vote on it. And if it's voted on the majority of the citizens, then by all means, let's move it. You know, Evergreen would be a good place to send it, but I think it needs to be voted on by the citizens of the town. And thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, next up is Bill Posey. Mr. Posey dropped off the call. So now I have, and this gentleman will have to pronounce his name, but it's a gentleman from the University of Houston.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Mamina. I'm a history professor at UHV. My training is in 19th century US history with a focus history of race slavery, and I have taught in college classrooms for 10 years. I've also lived in Victoria for 2 years. My husband and I own a house here, and we are committed to being a part of this community. So although I am not originally from Texas, I have made my home here. I also have extensive ties to the South. I was born in Florida, lived in Georgia, and did my graduate work at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. My colleague, Dr. Joe Locke, has already articulated the consensus of historians that removing Confederate monuments does not erase history. In fact, these Confederate monuments, which were erected decades after the war ended, tell a false and damaging story that bears no relationship to history. Victoria's monument, like all Confederate monuments, glorifies the Confederate cause and promotes a mythology of a unified Confederacy. Glorification is only possible by erasing the Confederate cause and neglecting Victoria's history of slavery. As Dr. Locke and I pointed out in our opinion editorial for the Victoria Advocate, the Confederacy was founded upon principles of white supremacy and on perpetuating human bondage. This is not a glorious cause. It was not a glorious cause in the 1860s, and it is not a glorious cause now. From the inception of the Confederate States, African Americans all over the country opposed Confederacy and its denial of Black personhood and Black citizenship. Enslaved Victorians were no exception. Martin Jackson, enslaved in Victoria County, said that he spent, quote, most of his time planning and thinking of running away from his enslaver. He wanted the United States Army to win the war, and I quote. Josie Brown was born into slavery in Victoria. Brown opposed slavery and the Confederate cause on the grounds that, quote, children too little to walk away from their mothers were sold right off the auction block. They were sold just like calves. Glorifying the Confederate cause and promoting a myth of a unified Confederacy ignores the opinions, indeed the very existence of African Americans in the South. 1/3 of Victoria's population was enslaved at the start of the Civil War. As testimonies of Jackson and Brown make clear, these enslaved men and women opposed human bondage and they opposed the Confederacy. African Americans continued to oppose the glorification of the Confederacy after the war. In an 1894 speech, Frederick Douglass declared, quote, whatever else I may forget, I shall never forget the difference between those who fought for liberty and those who fought for slavery, between those who fought to save the Republic and those who fought to destroy it, end quote. African Americans also opposed the erection of monuments that glorified the Confederacy. Writing in 1831, W.E.B. Du Bois asserted that if Confederate monuments were honest, they would read, quote, sacred to the memory of those fought to perpetuate human slavery, end quote. Instead, Du Bois noted that these monuments tried to make the Confederate cause more palatable, ironically and erroneously citing defenses of liberty as the reason for the war. Victoria's Confederate monument erases history. It erases the history of slavery in Victoria. It erases the history of the Confederacy. It erases African American opposition to the Confederate cause, ignores the contributions of people like Henry Mack, an enslaved man who earned his freedom, fought to preserve the United States, and worked to keep Victoria peaceful after the Civil War. The monument dishonors Mack, who settled in Victoria after his military service and died here. Removing Victoria's Confederate monument is crucial to properly remembering Victoria's history of slavery, to properly remembering the opposition of enslaved Victoria residents to the Confederacy, and to properly honoring the men like Henry Mack who fought to create a more just and equitable United States. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker is Jason Calloway. Jason Calloway, you're allowed to speak. Okay. Moving on, I have a Debbie Marsh. You're allowed to speak.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'm not like most of the other speakers. I didn't prepare a long speech to say today. I just wanted to express my feelings, and I'm not going to downplay how horrible slavery was and how everyone's against it. At one time, most people, including white people, were slaves. And sure, they didn't like it any more than anyone else, but that doesn't make it right. And as we started off this whole process, because of George Floyd, everyone who saw that video was disgusted, was appalled. This video of what this poor man, even though he had broke the law, he did not deserve to lose his life and in such a way. The killing of George Floyd was a good way to unite us. It could have been a way to unite us. Instead, groups like Black Lives Matter, and while there's so much put down of the South, which a lot of stuff that the South did wasn't good, let's remember that Black Lives Matter is a Marxist. It was founded by a Marxist. They want to do away with the police. They want free payments for their people, Black Americans, for college. And they're against authority. They want to change our country as we know it. And I feel like most of the people who are asking that this statue not be removed is because of their feelings on what is taking place in America right now. If the statue goes, we'll be next. And it's not like it has been shown in all the other cities that they don't stop at Confederate statues. I don't care to a certain degree whether or not the statue is there. If it is replaced, I think the cemetery is a good place to put it. But I do not think in the time of PC talk, people losing their jobs because they say all lives matter. I think some people feel like they're having to give away their rights in order for their people to be happy. I wish we could come together like we could have after Mr. Floyd died and get rid of the police officer that did take his life together and have more training for police. And Black people are not the only people who have trouble with the police. And I think it's been proven that more white people actually get killed than Black people do. But I'm not sure what else to say other than every side has a point. I hate to think of people walking by that statue and feeling inferior. I do not think anybody in Victoria that I know anyway wants them to feel that way. And I will pray for the council to make the best decision possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am.
Okay, the next citizen to speak is Jake Goodman. You're allowed to speak.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Goodman.
There we go. Well, I didn't really prepare a real speech, so I'll just be real quick. Now, I don't work with any organization or anything. This is just my opinion. But when we start looking at the issue about whether we're removing the statue that's been there over 100 years, it's kind of dishonest for us to start saying this is a matter of racism or white supremacy or the Confederacy. It's not red versus blue, black or white, or anything like that. It's about our identity. About us. It's about us being able to have a statue that stood there for 100 years that can stand the test of current climate of removal, the cancel culture. I mean, we're arguing about this, and it's going to be something that we remember for a long time. Because if we allow this string to fall, if we allow the next thing to happen for cultural wokeness to retroactively remove anything that we have considered valuable in the past because it's no longer in favor or it's fallen out of favor, what will we say 20 years from now whenever the politicians of today are denounced as bigots for having an unacceptable opinion from the period of history 20 years in the future? You can't judge the past by the values of the present. And I keep hearing, I've heard several speakers reference this, that the statue is a symbol of white supremacy. And they reference the Daughters of the Confederacy as a hate group, or they reference this organization hate group and reference this historian, that historian. Why does that matter? What matters is what we think of it in Victoria. We are the people that decide what that statue means. So if I say it represents an alien ship, that's my interpretation of it. That's art. So if you're going to decide that something needs to be removed because people consider it to be offensive, I think it is absolutely ridiculous to say that a statue is somehow provoking you, especially if that statue has been there for 100 years. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm 28 years old. I, by all demographics and everything, should be right on favor with the woke mob, but I'm not. And I'll tell you why. It's because I think for myself. Because just like to me, that statue does not represent white supremacy. To be honest, unless you read the thing, you can't even tell it's a symbol of the Confederate last stand. If you did not have that label on it, no one would even realize that was what it was about. And I think it is the height of arrogance for us to stand up and say that this is offensive, so it must be moved to Evergreen Cemetery and replaced. Where are we going to get from this? Is Texas Revolution going to be offensive in 10 years? After all, the people that fought in the Texas Revolution supported slavery. So is the Alamo out? Should get rid of should we get rid of the names of the local counties too? Should Jackson County be renamed because its namesake owned slaves? I mean, at what point is this going to end? Are we going to start naming our streets with numerical characters instead of names? Because you can't have a street named after a white man and you can't have a street named after a black man. It's just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But this is ridiculous. We can't go down this road because it ends in cultural Marxism. It ends in Maoist China. It ends in a Stalinistic purge. And if we do decide that that statue is ineffective, are we going to go through all the pictures and are we going to cut it out? Are we going to cut it out of the old pictures they did in the Soviet Union? I think that's ridiculous. And I mean, it is the height of irony that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We should be coming together. And what are we doing? Arguing about a historical statue that has stood there for 100 years. That is a statue. It does not breathe. It does not speak. And everyone is telling us that this is why it should be offensive. But no one is actually saying it's a statue. It's a statue. So we should be coming together, but instead arguing about this. This is the height of arrogance. And I think that in years in the future, people will stand up and look at this as one of the greatest ironies of history, that in the middle of coronavirus, we talked about a statue. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
The next caller is a call-in from 361-220-6298. Caller, please announce your name.
Yes, my name is Vanessa Calloway. Can you hear me?
Getting some feedback.
Yeah, did I take care of the feedback? I'm sorry about that.
I think so.
Oh, excellent. Good evening, Mayor McCoy, City Council members, and citizens of Victoria. I am Lieutenant Colonel retired Vanessa F. Hicks Calloway. I was born and raised in Victoria, Texas, and am a current resident. I am happy to announce that the old Reb Confederate soldier statue did not prevent me from purchasing a home here in Victoria, Texas, where I am raising my family in peace, safety, and harmony. I am a proud African American, and I am here to speak for myself. I do not need liberals or anarchists or Black Lives Matter members to speak for me. Do nothing but fan the flames of division by invoking the awful history of racism and slavery in this country. Doing so is really, in my opinion, despicable and insensitive and painful for those of us that can relate to what happened in the past. I thank you very much for allowing me with this opportunity to speak tonight against the removal of that Confederate statue. I will start by speaking directly to you, Mr. Mayor, and to the City Council members. You are the elected leaders of this community. Many voters and taxpayers of this city who placed you in these coveted positions of leadership expect you to lead on this issue with courage. Victoria, based on the way it regularly votes, is mainly conservative, which means the majority of the citizens of Victoria are not in favor of removing this statue. As a result, we are depending on you to use your leadership to do the right thing on behalf of the citizens of this fine city. Right now, we have a pandemic for you to be concerned about. I think it is ridiculous for a small group of people in this city to waste your time with this nonsense. This statue has not harmed anyone. Your job as leaders is to do your best, along with Victoria County, to do everything you can to protect our rights, preserve the peace, and keep us safe. So until that statue becomes a direct threat to the peace, safety, and to our rights, leave it be. These organizations and people have hidden agendas. I wish they would just be honest about it. Again, I'm speaking to you, Mr. Mayor, and the City Council leaders. If you allow this to happen, you are actually admitting that Victoria, Texas is racist and supports white supremacy. If you allow that statue to be removed, you are saying we are all guilty as charged. If this statue is removed, you will empower the statue, despite the fact it is harmless. If you allow this statue to be removed, in my mind, it will be seen as weak and as failure to represent the will of the people, the will of the majority. You leaders have the power to put an end to this by tabling it until we deal with this COVID pandemic and getting our children back in school. Do not bow down to these bullies. If you give an inch, trust me, they will not take just 1 mile, but 100 miles. Do not bow down. I am a soldier and an African American. I have never allowed that statue to steal my joy at all. Dead Confederate statues don't shoot. Put knees on my neck, spread white supremacy like a pandemic, or shout racial slurs at me as I walk downtown. At no time has this statue ever made me feel unloved in this community. So I say until that happens, do not allow the removal of that statue. Get to work concentrating on what we put you in office to do. Don't waste time with this attempt to move us closer to socialism and communism. Yes, I said socialism and communism. People who are no longer happy with Victoria are free to leave. They are more than to join other cities ran by weak leadership who allow the removal of their Confederate statues. This is nothing but a slippery slope. Cities in America who have allowed this nonsense have even gone on to destroy statues of Jesus Christ, Frederick Douglass, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and many other prominent members from our history. So I hope I have been clear. Do not allow that statue to be removed from its current location. Doing so is the first domino of peace, safety, and harmony that we all currently enjoy to fall. I'm happy to be a part of a monument task force designed a statue in honor of Juneteenth that can be placed in the city square downtown to add even more harmony and balance to our community. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and members and citizens of Victoria, Texas, I thank you so much for allowing me to have this opportunity to speak, and God bless you. May God bless the great state of Texas, and may God bless America.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am.
Next speaker is Pitt Tindrig. If you could please state your name.
Hi, my name.
I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good. Okay, so my name is Nadia Pittendrick, and I didn't prepare comments either, but I felt compelled to speak just listening to all the comments so far. And one of my observations listening is just an enormous amount of emotion is being expressed today. And that's natural, that's understandable. But I want to resist some of the emotional and the inflammatory and, quite frankly, inaccurate characterizations of why people want to remove this statue. What I'm hearing is some people are talking about there being a culture war. There are people who have spoken who've talked about there being a war within, that this is a war. And those same people have said that Black Lives Matter is the organization that is dividing us. And I've heard people talk about outsiders. I've heard people talk about cancel culture. And what all of that is talking points from the headlines. That's TV. That's Facebook. And that's not people. That's not our community here in Victoria. I am not the monster that you have portrayed. I am not, I'm hearing you talk about socialist, communist, Marxist ideology and secret agendas. And if we give an inch, this is going to be Maoist China. That's what's going on here. What's happening is people in your community that you care about and that you're connected to are saying that this statue doesn't mean the same thing to them as what it means to you. People are saying this statue allows me and makes me feel like I am not welcome. It makes me feel like my feelings don't count in this town. And it is about emotion. It comes down to whose feelings are going to count here. Is it going to be the feelings of the people who want that statue to continue, or is it be the feelings of the people who see the statue as a testament to this is a white town and white people rule and white people have the power? And what I want to say is that the movement to take the statue is really an invitation to everybody. Like we are all members of the same community. We're neighbors, and we have so much more in common than what Facebook and Twitter and the TV leads us to believe. These talking points, these labels that dehumanize each other are inaccurate. And we're the people that want to take statue down are your teachers, work at HEB. They smile at you, they care about you, attending to you when you go to the doctor's office. These are not leftist outsiders. So the invitation is that we all come together and listen to one another and create a shared future. We have to be able to live together. And you can't just say that the people that want this statue to be taken down are not part of are not part of that future. We want to create this together. And I'm just going to say one last thing. There are people who have said, I've lived in this town for so and so many years. Statue has been up for 100 years and it never bothered anybody. And what I want to say is, because it's not bothering you does not mean that it's not bothering your neighbor. It is bothering your neighbor. That's the message. Listen. Because somebody else is in pain doesn't mean, and you can't feel it, that doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. The problem is a shared problem, and we all have to come together as a community and make a better future. And that's all I say.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments.
Okay, the next speaker is Nadine Koch.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I am getting out of my comfort zone completely. I didn't even know if I could manage this Zoom call, but one thing I'm going to notate is I have listed those that have talked for the council's information before I do say what little bit I wrote about a couple hours ago in a little bit of preparation, is that those so far you've listened to, there's about 10 that are for keeping the statue, and there's 5 or 6, I think, with the last caller that are against it, just for your information. But what I wanted to say is that as my husband and I were again seeing it and took a picture of the Confederate soldier statue of the day, and it was dedicated, said that y'all know, June 3rd, 1912, way after the Civil War had ended and slavery had ended. And as I looked at it, just as I looked at it the other day, I saw a thin and weary faced soldier in that statue, and wearing rags that I guess was his uniform. And he wears a hat that I could tell. It looks like his head is bandaged, I believe, I suppose from battle. But one thing that came to my mind when thinking of and seeing this soldier was about a book that I read a couple of years ago that I turned over to a junior high Texas history lady because it caught my attention to the point that how harsh the war was on the Confederacy, to the point that they were in starvation, the soldiers, to the point that they would wash manure to get the kernels of corn out to eat that, and it was sustenance for them. That and a couple other things that I do not remember that was said in that little book, written in that little book, that makes a statement of the hardship that you're seeing in artistic form of a soldier to me. It says on there, immutable means unchanging, and the immutability of God, as I looked it up, because I didn't know exactly mutability meant, but immutability of God is an attribute that God is unchanging. Thank goodness. In his character, in his will, and in his promises. Perhaps we can get to some kind of middle ground here. We could all do right by this soldier that we look at. We can, yes, slavery was wrong. Yes, this should not have probably succeeded. You know, that's history. But maybe we can honor, when you look at that soldier, you can't miss the rags on him. The ideal that he took a stand, he had courage and persistence. That war went on probably way too long. And he not only faced battle, and as I've read, starvation, battle, starvation, death, for what he stood for at the time, just like our soldiers today. Maybe we could all look at the soldier not out of anger. That's what I'm hearing. The lady said something about emotions or resentment. But maybe we could look at him in pride. I mean, my husband is a Vietnam soldier. He didn't want to go. I didn't want him to go. It was scary. It was hard. But you know what? You admire and you're proud of that time there. Uh, you know, I'm not sure of my heritage if there is the Confederate soldier, you know, in my background. But if so, I would be proud that they served. Yeah, we all agree. My goodness, slavery was wrong. The Israelites, our lineage that were grafted in, they were slaves for 400 years. give me a break. We don't believe in that today. But was the soldier so wrong in standing up for what he believed, even though it was wrong, even though the war was lost? It was a lost cause, but it was what he understood at the time, and he had enough courage and persistence, the Confederacy, the soldiers, to take a stand. In that day and time.
I believe your time's up.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
We appreciate your comments very much.
Okay, the next speaker is Ron Sandage.
Can you hear me this time?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, I don't know what happened last time. Thank you for letting the audience listen, the citizens listen. There's been so much stuff discussed here. It's kind of like, if you don't take a prepared speech, you can throw it away probably because there's been enough said. If you look at the statue, and I don't want that statue moved. I don't want it interpreted plaques or anything done to it, because it is what it is. It stands for citizens. And that soldier might not have been a slave owner. Most people who fought were not slave owners. And people think that all those people went off so some rich slave owners could keep their slaves. I don't think that's a correct interpretation. Not all the Confederates were white. I mean, there was people like Santo Navitas and the 33rd Texas Cavalry down in the valley, made up of his brothers and a lot of other Hispanics and people like LeMay Apaches that tried to keep a check on the Union troops that were moving up through Brownsville all the time, trying to cut the traffic off that were going through Mexico. There were Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma. General Ston Watay was one of the few last Confederate generals that ended. He fought in the Battle of Pea Ridge, Arkansas. You had Jewish people. There were many Jews in the Confederate Army. The one-time Secretary of State and the Indian Secretary of War was a gentleman by the name of Judah Benjamin, who ran off to Europe to try to save his tail end at the end of the war. And people want to talk about white supremacy just being a Confederate thing. You got to look at what Lincoln said to a lot of people. I mean, he originally, in his first speech after he was elected, said that he couldn't do anything about slavery in the South. He didn't think he had the authority to do so. And he wrote a lot of times that there was a upper supremacy part and a lower supremacy part between the whites and the blacks, and he assigned the white as the supremacist part. So you got to go north and south. There were slave ships that came out of the United States. They didn't come out of Mobile, and they didn't come out of New Orleans. They came out of Rhode Island. But I mean, if you move the statue, people talk about it's going to upset them if they stay there. Well, there are a lot of us that are going to be upset if it gets moved. Even if you go to the cemetery, it's not a secure site, so there's not much telling, especially now, what's going to happen to it. I grew up at a time listening to Martin Luther King talk about being back together, and he dreamed of the time when sons of slaves and the sons of slave owners could sit down at the table fellowship and eat. I've been waiting that for a while. I haven't seen it, but as far as the wording on the plaque, as what I was told in researching this stuff, was that the words that everybody seemed to be upset about, that the gentleman who said that he was not even on the program to speak during that time. And I was told that he was kind of like everybody's Uncle Joe. He showed up at the parties and stuff, never quite understand what he's going to say. But I've been here a long time. I've been here since '61. I married a girl that was born and raised here. I fit the bumper sticker where I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as soon as I could. I'm a native Mississippian. My parents are Mississippians and stuff. Going back and visiting my grandparents and everybody over there in the 50s and all, I saw racism. I saw bad racism. I saw how it was with different restrooms and everything else. And boy, we're 180 degrees from that. So I don't know what everybody keeps talking about. Everything is white supremacy. Statue stay where it was. It's part of our history. It's a learning experience. You can interpret it whichever way you want to. You can use it as a tool. And I believe if somebody looks around De Leon Plaza, they can find a plaque that has that is commemorative of De Leon. So it is already there. I want to thank you, City Council, for allowing us to talk. I really appreciate it, and all that needs to be said. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your comment.
Next speaker is Theresa Vincent, is allowed to talk.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So my name is Theresa Vincent. I'm proudly a libertarian, just fun facts about me. I've also never committed murder. I've never been arrested for any crime. I've never engaged in any riots or looting or anything like that. But I somehow also would like for this statute to be moved. And the reason I have that opinion is because I vote for accuracy of the Confederacy, what it stood for, and what we are doing by deciding to move it today. Like some people have mentioned before, this monument was resurrected in 1912, and it was dedicated by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And the United Daughters of the Confederacy, after doing my research, it's been their lifelong goal to preserve the legacy of the South. And by doing so, they've resurrected 700 or so statues, monuments, and dedications so that they can be seen and recognized as the ultimate authority about the Civil War and the Confederacy. The issue with that is that the lessons and facts, so-called facts that they are teaching are false. They emphasize minimizing the horrors of slavery. They state that the Confederacy and the Civil War was done for state rights instead of calling it what it is. After doing some digging, I was able to find the Texas official Declaration of Causes from the Secession Convention of Texas in 1861. So, which stated, and quote, it was done to, our state openly declared that it abandoned the United States in order to protect, and quote, the institution known as Negro slavery, the servitude of the African to the white race, which her people intended should exist in all future time. So the reason I vote for this statute to be moved, not necessarily eliminated completely, is because as a Victorian who was born and raised here, I would like to correct our interpretation of history to show that this statue was resurrected by people who are trying to whitewash slavery and say that it was something that it was not. I also would like to say about the fact that this has been here for a little over 100 years and it's just now coming to light. People of color are now having a better platform to be the narrative of our history. So it makes total sense that now there are more people who are speaking up and saying that they are uncomfortable with this statute and would like it moved. And as someone who is white and never had to deal with any kind of stereotyping or racial slurs or anything, I don't think it's up to me to say if something is offensive or not. So I am totally in support of there being a vote to decide if this is offensive, if it should be removed or not. And I just want to also say one more thing, that it was a little eye-opening to do my research on this statue and on the Confederacy in general. Just like a couple of people have said, actually wrote down your name, Brandon. You talked about how the Confederacy and the Civil War was about taxes and states' rights. That's what I was taught, elementary, middle school, high school. And it was very conflicting feelings to do my research and find out some of the lies that I was taught that I didn't find out until just the past couple of weeks, that the Confederacy was about slavery. And it was definitely blanketed over and kind of covered up all of my upbringing in Victoria. So this is me doing what I can to come forward and speak and say, I would love for that to be moved and commemorated somewhere else, where we're talking about the horrors that the soldiers had to go through, but also recognizing that they were supporting something that we are totally against now. So thank you so much for listening. So yes, have a good day.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker is Bill Posey. Bill Posey has dropped off. The next speaker is Take America Back, Texas. Allowed to talk. Please state your name.
Yes, sir. My name is Brian Phoebus. I wasn't born and raised in Texas. I was actually born and raised in Illinois. With that being said, we were taught in history completely different than what was actually stated. Like, for example, we was taught throughout our years and stuff that Lincoln was a Democrat and that Republicans were against were with slaves and all that nonsense. I've served 10 years in the military. I'm a disabled vet. I've been all around the world. I've been in war 3 different times. I finally reside in Texas, which Texas is the most patriotic state in the country. I'll tell you that right now. And I learned nothing but true history and what we've been lied to, what I've been lied to all my life. At the end of the day, we're talking about soldiers here that fought for our country, whether it was for good or for bad. And that lady, that was a fellow soldier of mine, I stand right behind her. You know, I want to erase history because of something, it was bad. I mean, come on. I fought for Iraqi war. We know what was true on that one. Are we going to erase monuments for that? For the people that fought for this country? I mean, people are standing on and kneeling on flags and burning down flags for crying out loud. You guys are letting the Democratic Party run this, run the, the hate groups. I mean, put that stuff aside. I'll tell you what, by November and stuff, ain't nobody gonna care about what statue needs to come down or not. Because really, if this was about slavery and all that, they would be defacing Lincoln. This is so crazy that the left is brainwashing you guys on well, we need to take these statues down. Well, it's okay to have Martin Luther King statue or Barack Obama statue, but we can't have any of our heritage statues up. It's nonsense. This really is nonsense too. I feel like you guys should have it on voting on the ballot, because really you got half these people don't even live in your community that's talking, especially your history professors, which I had history professors up in Illinois, and they were all telling me a bunch of lies about history all my life. I mean, this is insane. These soldiers died for our country, whether it was good or bad. They made America. And you guys sit here and want to listen to this and vote for this right here and talk about removing a statue. I mean, you guys are going down the wrong path here. You guys want to create chaos, not only in this country, but in this great state of Texas that became the most patriotic state in the country. I think you guys need to look at it. Look about all the soldiers that fought for this country, whether it was for the good or the bad or the ugly. Because I guarantee you, everybody down their lineage has had a soldier that fought for this country. You guys need to pay them the respect that they deserve. I think that's all I need to say.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Okay, the next speaker is Tommy. Tommy, you'll need to state your full name. Tommy, you're still muted. Could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, am I here?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, let me say this. Yan Hipe Washte, you don't know, I am Lakota. And in saying that, and what you guys are talking about, this statue, I say that you in Victoria move out of Victoria and give the Lakota people, my brothers, the Cheyenne, and the other natives, Victoria. Is that not what you're asking? That's what will happen. Now, I've heard professors on here talking about the Confederate soldier. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. How many people have ever heard of the 37th Regiment or the 34th Regiment, actually called by both names, which were both Black and Hispanic and Native American, fighting for the Confederacy, nonetheless? How many Blacks fought for the Confederacy? Over 50,000. So this is not about a statue that is the Confederate that had racism in his heart. No, this, you go back, there was really nothing more important than state rights. That's why Texas became its own country and then became a state. And these people were fighting for their states, not for a country. That's why most of the armies at the time came from states. I used to belong to a Civil War reenactment group in Missouri. And I've learned more than the professors I've heard talking on here. I don't know where they got their PhDs from, but they need to get their money back. I learned so much there, it's not even funny. Everybody thinks the Civil War gets fought in blue and gray. They didn't. If I showed you a Confederate flag of Missouri, you wouldn't recognize it. It has a white cross on it. Why? Because they were in a big revival during that time. Was Lincoln bad? I don't know. He put the Supreme Court justice in home prison. He had to do what he had to do. People don't talk about that. I've seen BML come on and say, oh, we're not in about that. They are. What did they do to the Lincoln statue? He was anti-slavery, but he was pro-Black. That's what they said. No, keep statue. Keep Victoria. That's what I say. And that's all I got to say about it. God bless Texas.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the next speaker to speak is Jason Calloway. Jason, you will need to unmute yourself. Okay.
Who's the next speaker?
The next speaker is Nathan F. So Nathan, you'll need to state your full name.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So I'm Nathan Fleer, and I just wanted to point out that Nadine had a good point. The speaker earlier when she mentioned that you could see the reminder of how bad the war was. I think that's one of the big things you can glean from it, is just how the atrocity of the war is artistically demonstrated in a statue, and we need those tactile reminders. You can read about it in a book. But the thing is, without a tactile example of it, then people don't really grasp what all happened. I use as an example, my mom's side of the family was Cherokee and Choctaw. And so what they would always do is whenever they see like statues or something of like pioneers or something, they would just say, hey, those are the people who, traveled through here. And of course they would say, yeah, they did bad things. They kicked us off our land and all that, like a lot of good things too. And so it gave them an opportunity to talk about how, there were good things, there were bad things. And we need to remember not to do those bad things ever again. And so by having that tactile reminder there, we can look at it and say, like say, for instance, I don't have kids yet, but let's say I'm walking down the street and I have a kid with me and they say, hey, Daddy, who's that? And they point at the statue and say, oh, well, that's, whoever, I can name whoever the statue is. And I can talk about, the good things they did, the bad things they did, and why it's a reminder of why we don't do those things again. And if we don't have that example there, then we don't get that opportunity, and you start getting bad things happening all over again. Like, for instance, you look over in California and they just repealed Prop 209. It specifies that the state can't discriminate based on race. So now they're removing that so that they can't discriminate based on race. And one of the reasons is that they aren't very fond of Jews and Asians because they're so successful. I actually know a particular lawsuit that's going on. I can't talk too much about it right now, where there is an Asian student who was not allowed into Harvard because Asians were too successful and they didn't want more Asian students. That's all I can say about that. Columbia University, for instance, is starting to segregate their graduations again. They had a white graduation and a black graduation. They're talking about having a white dorm and a black dorm, gym, black gym, white drinking fountain, black drinking fountain. Sound familiar? And if you start getting all these examples, of things that happened in the past, good and bad, then people start to forget about stuff like that. And they start thinking, oh, it's a good thing to do that because, everyone's better off with their own kind, right? And it's like, no, we try to get away from that. And if we don't have those statues around to sort of remind us of that, then, we lose all that and we go back to the beginning where we started. And we've made too much progress to turn around and go back. So we need to leave those things around as examples to things like that. That's just my 2 cents. And I know George Orwell in the past said that every record's been destroyed or falsified, every book's been rewritten, every picture's been repainted, every statue, street, and building has been renamed, every date's been altered. History has stopped. Nothing exists except the endless present in which the party is always right. And if you destroy your history and don't have examples of it, then you will repeat it. And bad things happen again. Nobody will remember, what you went past to get where you are now. So you need to leave those examples there. So we have that conversation starter so we can say, well, that's why we don't do it anymore. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. And thanks for letting me throw that in.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker is Andre. You need to state your full name, please.
Andre Mednes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I wanted to say that I would like to keep the statue there. I would, if we want to go forward with history, we can put another statue or monument right next to it. We should not destroy history. I mean, Texas was a Confederate state, yes. So what are you going to do? Will you abolish Texas also then? You can't. It's just part of our history. So my feeling would be just to add to there, then let them, rather than spend money tearing it down, moving, Let's investigate if there should be a different statute that would clarify some of this, put up next to it. And I won't take up any more of your time, and thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, the next speaker is William Posey. You're allowed to talk.
You hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, the City Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. You know, the Constitution says it in 3 words, what we were a lot of us trying to say here tonight. We the people. I believe we should take this to a vote May 1st at the city election and let the people speak. What's a purer form of voice of the people rather than vote? So let's put this into action. I'm sorry?
That was Alexa talking to you from my desktop.
Oh, okay. Hey, Alexa, how are you?
Sure. Did you ever?
Sorry, Mayor. But let the people answer this. We'll have an election. It'll be decided, and it'll take the heat off the city council and off the mayor. I think it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, the last one we have is Justin Urbano. You're allowed to speak, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty, guys. Hey, well, I'm so glad to be here with you. I just wanted to say that, you know, I really love everybody. I really love people. And if we just do the right thing, everything should be okay. If we just do what we know in our hearts is right and really set aside drifting through life, meaning that our emotions are controlling the decisions we make instead of really focusing on the facts and doing the right thing, you know, just the overall right thing. And it has nothing to do with your political party. It has nothing to do with what you feel or anything. It has to do with just the absolute right thing. And sometimes we get away from that because we're so focused on pleasing others. We're so focused on, you know, what others might think of us. And we forget to just do what's right. And if we just focus on the facts and exactly what has been spoken tonight about how people feel and about what's actually laid out in history. And I think if we do that, then the right thing will just, you know, will just happen. And that's all I have to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin, for your comments.
Mayor, we have some more speakers. John McCammon is allowed to speak. John, can you hear us? Okay, we will go to another speaker. The next speaker is a call-in from 915-356-0195. Caller, if you could announce your name.
There, this one.
Yes, hello?
Back. Hello? Can we move to the next speaker?
So the next speaker is Clint Ives. You're allowed to speak.
Hello?
Clint Ives, you're allowed to speak.
Council, can you hear me?
Yes, barely.
Barely? How is that?
That's better.
All right. Apparently you got to hold the phone up to your head. Mayor, Council, I appreciate your time. I know you've had a long evening and you may have a long list of speakers to go through, but I did want to provide an alternative if Council may be uneasy or maybe looking at different options. I did want to offer that Victoria County would gladly receive your Confederate monument. We purchase it, we can move it, and we will move out across the street to the courthouse. I only offer that as an opportunity for Victoria County to honor our rich history. I'm not as not a striking member of the academia as some of your calls have been, although Dr. Young would argue that. I will go on the record that I'm not a field in this scholar, but we do appreciate and honor our rich history here in Victoria County. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for all you do. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Ives. I think that pretty much concludes the list. Or do I see one more?
Yes, Mayor, that is everybody who has wished. Oh, take that back. We have one more who is called in, 915-356-0195. You're allowed to speak.
Yes, hello, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you having this meeting, although I think it's unfortunate we have to have this. But I'm going to make this really brief. I've listened, I have a degree in history. I taught in historical field for a while. But I've listened to the condescension and the lectures from these so-called academians all night long telling us what our history is and what it isn't and how we should think. Part of the reason I'm no longer in that field is because of cultural Marxists that have taken over those industries and that industry and those institutions and have Orwellian told us what history is. I've heard historians tonight lecture us on getting rid of statues would not be an erasure of history. Well, the Buddhas of Baymen were blown up about 20 years ago by the Taliban. There's no books over there. There's no microchips. There's nothing that they're going to tell these people 500 years from now what those giant holes in the wall are. So they were erased from history. The ancient city of Palmyra was destroyed by the ISIS due to religious fanaticism that only is rivaled by cultural Marxist fanaticism. That city no longer exists, built by the Romans. It has been erased, okay? All those paintings, sketches, books that were thrown into the fire by the socialists, the National Socialists in Germany during their attempt to erase history are no longer here. And unless you got a portal gun and you're in with Rick Sanchez, they're not coming back. They've been erased. So if you erase this statue, it's not coming back. And that's their goal. They know that. That's why they want to do this, because once they erase what was, then they can recreate it the way they want it. Okay, go ask Stalin as he put thousands and millions of religious people, artifacts, monks in the graves, along with Mao, whose cultural Red Guards did exactly that. And I'll remind my esteemed colleagues that are learned, educated individuals, the first people to fall victim to the Red Guards were you, the educated class. Think about that. And if we're going to start tearing down things based on slavery, let's start with the pyramids. 2,500 years of rules for the Egyptian pharaohs based on existence through ended with slavery. Let's get rid of them. Let's get rid of the Colosseum. Okay? Get rid of that. That's a monument to slavery. How about Angkor Wat over Cambodia? You know, they had some slavery over there too. Okay? And let me tell you something. Once you give these people a little bit, they're not going to stop. If people don't get it in their head what is occurring right now, if they don't stand up, if this city council doesn't stand up, if the local community leaders, if our elected officials don't get out of their chair, stand up and say, no, we're not going to be in a good place soon. And let me tell you something, a statue doesn't fight back. I do. For all you coastal Marxists, all you soy boy socialists with your gender studies degrees, and all you Black Lives Matter activists who happen to be primarily white, that statue ain't gonna fight back. I will. Bring it on. I'm out.
Okay. Where do we
Okay,
stand?
Mayor, we have one more. and that is Rebecca Lake. You're allowed to speak.
Thank you. Is my audio working?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for this chance to provide a public comment. I saved my comment to the end because I wanted to actively listen to as many comments as I could during the council meeting today. It's a point of interest for me during this meeting, but also in my time in Victoria since I moved here in 2017. I grew up in Texas, raised in Texas, born in Texas, graduated from a public high school in Texas, and I experienced what some of the folks on the line today have described as kind of an awakening to what our true history is. I majored in history during college in Texas. And so I've also been listening to kind of try to discern what are the active common threads throughout this conversation. And one of the points that stood out to me is that we seem to be ships passing in the night. Over and over again, I've heard different individuals suggest that the proposal, such as it is, would be to destroy the statue, erase history. You would think that the movement was to pummel it to dust, when in fact, tonight on the line, I've only heard suggestions, recommendations to move the statue to either a cemetery location, a museum location, or the like, and provide it with greater historical context. And so I'm not quite sure if these comments about destroying history are really failing to actively listen to the feelings and the values that are being expressed in our community. If they're prepared remarks that weren't really, designed to address these specific concerns and requests, or if something else is driving this. And so I listened deeper to try to understand what is the fear that is animating a lot of these comments. I heard kind of more on, a moderate side. Debbie Maresh, I believe, referenced the George Floyd death that we saw this year and the uprising of support for the Black community that followed that. But I noticed even in her comments, she stated that George Floyd broke the law, but even breaking the law, he didn't deserve to lose his life. As a former prosecutor, I just have to correct this mischaracterization. George Floyd didn't live to have his day in court and determine whether he was guilty of any crime. And I think a lot of the time when we get into these heated debates, we start to mischaracterize. And so we've seen the mischaracterization of what individuals are suggesting would happen to the statue, the mischaracterization of the Black experiences of our fellow citizens. And we're also hearing mischaracterizations of our historical context. I've heard lots of comments tonight about what is our true historical context, and yet I've only heard one particular side quote to any historical text or any historical organizations. And so when citing to history without providing those references, I have to be suspect as a person who studied history myself. And so going back to some comments that were made by Mr. Burkhart, which I was listening carefully to, he mentioned that citizens are clear, that there hasn't been a vote, et cetera, in order to, and that all of Texas is in favor of these types of monuments. And yet the Austin American-Statesman reported, according to a survey from the Southern Poverty Law Center, that Texas is leading the nation in states that are removing Confederate memorials and monuments. And so I did hear those comments as well. I don't recall if it was from Michelle Adams or the speaker previous to her, but she did make a comment as to Texas needs to lead the way. And so if we look at the current present values of our country and listen to all of our citizens and not just those that have been historically elevated and enriched by generational wealth and privilege, then I think we see a different story. And so I would just encourage our fellow citizens, encourage the council to actively listen to the values that are being expressed and not these mischaracterizations that are occurring throughout the discussion today. Further, as my final comment, I would just ask that you take into account the United Daughters of the Confederacy history that was shared today. It's extremely important and concerning in terms of their belief system and why it is that private interest groups such as this, which was empowered at a time when women did not have the power to vote, why those values still stand as a symbol of our community today in the heart of our downtown. So thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, another speaker is Amy Mundy. You're allowed to speak.
Hello.
Amy, you will need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want, this is Amy Mundy from Victoria, Texas. I've lived here a long time. And I think this is a decision that needs to be made by the people of Victoria. So I just wanted to call in and second Bill Posey's idea to put this on the ballot. I think that would be a great way to let everyone feel as it should be left up to. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Amy.
Mayor, that is all of the citizens' comments.
I see no more, so let's call a secession to the comments and move on to the agenda. Can you take us to the consent agenda, Mr. Goosh?
Certainly. There are items on the consent agenda tonight which will be approved by a single vote. They are first, adopting the minutes of the regular city council meeting held on July 7th, 2020. Second, appointing a member to the Victoria Housing Finance Corporation Board of Directors. Third, awarding a contract for replacement of 10 HVAC systems to Schrader Refrigeration Company Incorporated in the amount of $99,200. Fourth is the approval of a renewal of an annual supply contract with International Dioxide Incorporated for liquid sodium chloride in an estimated amount of $119,520. Fifth is the approval of a renewal of an annual supply contract with Brentag West Incorporated for liquid chlorine in an estimated amount of $154,370. Sixth is the approval of a renewal of an annual supply contract with Brentag Southwest Incorporated for liquid phosphate-based corrosion inhibitor in an estimated amount of $57,911.25. Seventh is the approval of a renewal of an annual contract with Pinco Incorporated for liquid ferrous chloride in the amount of $79,886.40. And eighth, and finally, is the approval of a renewal of a contract with Yellowstone Landscaping for mowing in the amount of $348,057.
I make a motion, we accept the consent agenda as written.
I second the motion. A motion and second to accept the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say
Item
take it
E1.
to council discussion.
Item E1 is to appoint and or reappoint members to the Victoria Health Facilities Development Corporation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The next resolution tonight appoints members of the Victoria Health Facilities Development Corporation. The presentation that was included in the packet is the same presentation that Assistant City Manager ATN and I presented at the last council meeting. I can gladly go over that entire presentation again, or we can simply skip to the portion about the appointments, or we can just talk about the appointments. Up to you.
Skip to the appointments.
Skip to the appointments. Yeah.
Okay, James, if you can skip to the 5th slide, the one that talks about the composition. Can you move to the 5th slide, James? I believe you're in the wrong presentation. You should be in the Health Facilities Development Corporation. That's the housing finance.
Sorry.
There is.
Okay, so the The Health Facilities Development Corporation Board is composed of 3 members that all must be council members. They serve 2-year terms. You are allowed to be reappointed, and the terms cannot exceed the period for which a director is a public official. The current members are Councilman De La Garza, Councilman Young, and Councilwoman Scott. And the terms currently expire in June 2020, or expired in June 2020. The new term would expire 2 years from now in June 2022. We could elect the same council members to that post, or we could elect new council members. It's completely your decision.
April, this is Councilman De La Garza. I do wish to be reelected
Thank you, sir.
or reappointed.
Yes, sir. I'm not certain if Dr. Young is still on the meeting.
Dr. Young is no longer on the meeting.
Okay.
Then he's sure to get appointed, I'm pretty certain.
Make a motion, we reappoint him.
I second that motion.
And, Ms. Scott, are you willing to serve again?
I'm willing to serve again. We have so many exciting things that we're going to do on all 3 of the commissions that we've been notified about, that it would be my honor to serve on any or a combination of.
So I believe that all the council members are willing to reserve in those positions. If y'all would like to appoint the same 3 members, we just need a motion.
I move that we accept the 3 nominees.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second to accept the 3, reappoint the 3 members of the commission. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Mayor, item E2 is a resolution to continue the state of local disaster that was previously declared on, by the mayor. This is a further continuation of the disaster declaration that has already been once continued by council. A month ago, when I brought this to you for a continuation, I told you that we would hold off on the second continuation until we found out whether or not the governor had further extended the statewide state of local disaster, and he did do that. And so now I'm bringing this resolution to you to continue the local state of disaster for the same terms. That is, we will wait and see until the governor renews his statewide state of disaster, and then bring back a resolution to you at the very next meeting to continue the local state of disaster.
I move we accept E2.
I second it.
A motion and a second to accept item E2. Any discussion? Hearing now, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Mayor, item E3 is to approve amendments to the VSTDC bylaws. The VSTDC bylaws state that any amendments need to be approved by City Council. Recently, VSTDC made a series of updates and clarifications to their bylaws. The first major change was to reorganize Article 1 to clarify what the purpose of the corporation was. And that was a non-substantive change in that there were no purposes added and none subtracted. They were simply reorganized to reflect what they believe to be the priorities of their organization. Secondly, they amended Article 3 to clarify that the president of Victoria Economic Development Corporation, that is Dale Fowler, would serve as a non-voting advisor to the board of the Sales Tax Corporation. So those bylaws have been submitted to you for approval.
I move if we accept item E3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept item E3.
I have a
Any
question.
discussion?
Yes, I'm not I'm not sure if it's a question or discussion. In the packet for review, when I choose this agenda item, I get the choice of two different versions. I tend to accept the later one, and I'm not sure there's any difference. But because this program that we're using is relatively new, I want to point that out and ask if that's the way it's supposed to be, and make sure we're voting on the latest version.
No, ma'am. Thank you for pointing that out. You should only be seeing one version, which would be the most recent version. Neither the bylaws nor the resolution changed, but I did clarify or correct an error that was in the background memo. Some of you may have seen an email about that where I incorrectly stated or incorrectly summarized the change that was made to Article 3. And so I corrected that. And so that may be why you're seeing a second document, but there should be no change to either the bylaws themselves or the resolution.
I don't know if you can see this. I just want to point it out.
Thank you for doing so. Yes, I will investigate that in our new software and determine why it's doing that to see if I can correct it.
All right.
Further discussion or clarifications? Then all those in favor of item E3 say so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Same sign. We now move to city manager's report.
Mayor and council, we have, as of 6:45 today, on our COVID update, 103 new cases today, bringing the total active number up to 1,307 cases. We also have 1,354 cases that have recovered. As a city, we continue to make efforts to improve our safety measures that we can take and to protect our employees and our citizenry. On that front, there have been a number of funds made available to the city for those purposes, and a number of funds expended in dealing with this pandemic. To give you an update on that, Wesley Janacek from our finance department has prepared a presentation that he'd like to talk through.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is an update on the funding provided by the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which was established by the CARES Act. I guess, do I have control of the presentation? All right, thank you. All right, so this fund was created to aid states and local governments for necessary expenditures related to COVID-19. The funding was initially provided by the U.S. Treasury and is being administered by TDM for the state of Texas. Initial distributions were made by the Treasury to jurisdictions with populations over 500,000, and later the governor approved allocations to jurisdictions under 500,000 based on a per capita rate of $55 per person. The city submitted its funding request on June 2nd. Next slide. And so the total allocation is 3.7 million. We were able to request an advance of 20% or $740,000, which we did receive in June. The remaining 80% will be reimbursed, will be provided on a reimbursement basis upon approval of cost by TDM. So per the fund guidelines, allowable expenditures must be incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to COVID, not accounted for in the city's fiscal budget, and incurred between March 1st and December 30th. For the jurisdictions under $500,000, the state did enforce additional restrictions. These restrictions call for 75% of the expenditures to be spent in the categories of medical, public health, and payroll costs for employees whose services are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency, which for the most part would be your public safety employees. It would also include employees whose roles were substantially altered, such as those who worked at the EOC hotline. The remaining 25% can be spent in any of the categories. There's been some discussions through TML and some of the other cities that are affected by these restrictions. They've sent a letter to the governor requesting that he lift those restrictions, mostly because they want a little more flexibility in spending the funds on economic support for local businesses. I know that letter was sent maybe a couple of weeks ago now, and still haven't heard any updates from the governor on whether or not he's willing to lift those restrictions. So far, what we've done locally here is we've created a submission form, which was distributed out to the departments at the beginning of June to develop some potential projects that would fit the guidelines of this fund. We received most of those back around the end of June. Okay. This table is a list of all those projects that were submitted. You'll notice we'll have the categories at the top and which ones represent the 75% versus the 25%. So far, the total requests are a little over $4 million, which is more than our allowable allocation. So there will be some vetting done there. Our 75% threshold is 2.77 million. And so far, the requests we have in the first three categories are 2.5 million, which means if we want to spend the full allocation, we'll need to identify some additional projects falling within those first three categories. And I have a transition if you'll go. All right, so the blue arrows there represent the projects that we've already expended costs on. Those are the new window at the city secretary, Meals on Wheels that the employees at the library assisted with, the plexiglass shields at the library, and then the laptops that were purchased for employees in order to enable the ones that didn't have the opportunity to work from home. Now they'll be able to work from home with the laptops. All right. So the next steps would be to include to continue reviewing the projects that have been submitted and identify which ones would meet the guidelines. For any of those that we're unsure on, we're going to send to TDM, which I sent those about a week and a half ago. I haven't heard anything back from them, but I have been following up regularly to see when we can expect a response from them. We've been tracking expenses since March. We'll continue to do so in order to determine what we can get reimbursed on, as well as any funds that have been expended, any costs that have been included in like our general fund or a water fund that we need to include for reimbursement. Okay, next slide. All right, so all of our payroll costs currently have been expensed in the city's funds. So like I said, they've been expensed in the general fund or the water fund where they've been budgeted. So we're working to keep track of that time and identify what amounts would be reimbursed by TDM and then subsequently reimbursed to the city. In addition, we're retroactively establishing a hazard pay policy for employees with COVID eligible time. This pay would be reimbursable through the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Once we have an amount calculated as far as what needs to be returned to the funds, we'll come back to council with a budget amendment and also an additional update on the status of expenditures and reimbursements. So taking a look at what we spent so far, we have about $90,000 in supplies and maintenance, which is going to include your hand sanitizers, masks, and some of the work that was done to create the physical barriers that you see around the city's facilities. There's $25,000 in contractual and other charges. That's going to include the hand wash stations, cost of testing, advertising, among others. The $57,000 in capital items is going to be laptops that were purchased along with the Microsoft licenses. And then so far, what we've identified is about $701,000 in COVID-related time between public safety and the other departments. Most of that, of course, is made up of general fund and our water fund. Currently, the general fund stands at about $527,000 in payroll costs, and our water wastewater fund is at $117,000. So the amount there, that total amount is $701,000. It includes paid leave for individuals who did not have the ability to work from home and stay at home in order to comply with public health measures. It also includes individuals who had to stay home and were provided or compensated with paid leave due to any isolation guidelines or having to stay home with daycares being closed and having no other options for their kids. So, like I said, we're continuing to track the costs and identify which projects would be eligible. We'll get approval from TDM and move forward on those and begin the reimbursement process once we've incurred some more costs. Are there any questions?
No, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks for staying on top of all of those costs.
Are there any questions that we can answer outside of COVID as long as it is allowed on the agenda in the city manager's report? If not, then we thank you for your time and we'll be done.
I think we will conclude the regular portion of our agenda and move into executive session, and our meeting broadcast will end.
Yes, sir. The executive session tonight is, we will recess on tonight, the 21st day of July, 2020 at 7:39 p.m. The subject matter of the executive session deliberation is as follows. It's an executive session in accordance with Texas Government Code Section 551.087 to discuss or deliberate the offer of to a financial or other incentive to a business prospect that the city council seeks to have locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the city of Victoria, and with which the city of Victoria is conducting economic development negotiations. Thank you.
Okay. Are we now in executive session offline?
Okay.
No, sir,
James,
we
can you
now have
allow me-
to, yes, sir, I am going to start doing that now.
Okay.
So I need to start